the Dana White Epstein.
Oh, Epstein comment. Yeah. What's your take on that? Now, I guess to catch everybody up, I'm going to paraphrase.
Yeah.
Epstein said something like, we see a world where eventually we'd like to get to where every WWE fan is a UFC fan and every UFC fan is a WWE fan. And I'm sure he felt like there was crossover. And once upon a time, I did believe there was a lot of crossover. I think as time has gone on, there is less and less. But certainly you look at guys like Brock Lesnar and Ronda Rousey. I mean, certainly Conor McGregor is a natural born sports entertainer. There's other names that would check that list. I mean, just looking at the current roster today, Shayna Baszler, Mr. Riddle, there's a bunch of talent who could make it there if their MMA career is over one day. But Dana White came out and said, that's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard.
So, Conrad, this is what's bizarre. I can't say it's completely different. I thought Epstein's point was we want to create synergies on mega weekends, pay-per-view weekends, where there's a Friday night event for UFC and a Saturday night event for WWE, or Saturday, Sunday, or whatever it may be. I thought not only yes, but hell yes.
That'd be huge.
It is I believe for the majority, it is two separate fan bases, but you have one load in, one up and down. I'm talking about from a production point of view. You're in one arena. You have, just like the synergies of finance and HR and administrative and accounting and all that kind of stuff. Okay, well, their place of work is in one town, not two. And so there's a lot of situations where I think there's an upside. And I also think you can just own the town. Go see UFC Friday, go see WWE Saturday, because it really is, for the most part, two different audiences. I thought and I think we're going to see that. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to flush out, but I'm not going to say a Mania weekend or a SummerSlam or Survivor Series, the big four, so to speak. I don't think it's going to happen on those weekends, but let's just take, what was the latest one? Payback in Pittsburgh or whatever it was. I can see a Friday, Saturday with that, because there's so many events. I think it can create a whole new kind of branding initiative with a lot of upside. And you can have the occasional, we'll call it a fan fest where you have, all under one roof. I think there's a lot of ways to monetize that. So I just thought it was interesting. If not the day that they merged, the day after, Epstein and Dana are on polar opposite sides. And I'm like, is that the message you want to put out right away? But all fun. We're in the fight game. So conflict creates. So anyhow, go ahead, Conrad. No, I think it's great for the industry a whole. I think it's great for AEW. I think it's great for any and everything. And I don't put them in the same bucket. I think it's great for MMA, and I think it's great for professional wrestling.
Can you imagine how exciting it would be if the UFC used WWE production, like as far as the staging and the ramp and the video boards and all that? Like, UFC fans would lose their mind with that level of presentation.
And I think we're going to see it. I think it's in a lot of ways, and I've said this going back 3 generations. In professional wrestling, wink, wink, we control wins and losses and presentations and storylines and everything that goes with it. And in the UFC, they don't have that luxury, so to speak. And so it is always a different game. It literally is. What are we going to promote? Because they don't create Conor McGregor's every day. You kind of capture that lightning in a bottle. Whereas, you don't create a John Cena overnight, but man, you can create one. And, he came back last couple of weeks ago. They're riding that. Rock came back riding that. That's what's really cool. You can utilize past stars in such a monstrous way.
Yeah.
You see that Rock video?
Over 100 million impressions very quickly.
22 million in TikTok in like hours.
Yeah, I mean, over the weekend, over 100 million impressions just from that. And of course, I think there was even a quote out there from Batista. Rock and Batista can't do much right now. There's a writer's strike. Hollywood's shut down. So there is going to be some opportunity. That's going to lead to lots of debate. I do want to ask you, about The Rock and WrestleMania, just hypothetically. But before we get there, I wanted to circle back to something we were talking about. Like, on the one hand, I think it would be awesome as a cost saving measure, like you're saying, use that same arena, just tear down the wrestling ring and set up the UFC cage. Then you could certainly use the WWE video boards and all that stuff. But man, I saw something that said that WWE's top line gross so far this year is higher than UFC's, but UFC had more than double the profit, which means you've got to create some economies of scale. You got to create some efficiencies. You want WWE to be percentage wise as profitable as UFC, if that can be done. Well, one of the things you got to think that they would be looking to save on is that presentation, the production, because it is such a monstrous expense for WWE to buy all that stuff, to set it up, to tear it down, to truck it, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I think I've heard before that just one extra truck is something like 350 grand a year in cost savings, just by taking one less truck. Not talking about the shit in it, just the truck moving around. It's going to save you like a boatload of cash. So I'm just thinking, do you think there's a way? Is it possible? Is it conceivable that wrestling starts to feel a little more old school? Like UFC guys just walk out of a tunnel now. And I used to love the idea that the WWF back in the day when I grew up, they had that giant lit logo, the WWF, and then the guys just walk through. That was awesome to me. And I know now it maybe is almost overproduced because we've got the huge staging, but we've spoiled wrestling fans on that. Can we go back to the way it used to be? That would represent a huge cost savings, or is it more likely that UFC just uses the WWE stuff?
The business never goes backwards. They're not, and why would they? And look, I'm not a financial wizard and digging into everything, but when you text me that, I don't know, we were talking or texting and all that, the first thing that came to my mind is I'd love to do a breakout of talent cost. And I'm going to defend UFC or the MMA game because they pay the fighters on the card and that's their cost. But in professional wrestling land, you have a big lick, so to speak, because it's a perfect example here of Cena, a past guy who's not full time. You've got one-offs, you've got Logan Paul, you got Bad Bunny, you got all these different things that, so the profitability, isn't there. And I know they're beholden to the bottom line, but that's one of the things that they're going to get in there and figure out. I'm sure that if they can enhance the UFC production, which they will, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, because when you really look at the I'll call it the brand Q rating, maybe the best way. There's just probably get heat percent. There's just no comparison. I mean, they're both global brands, but look at the football, basketball, baseball combined doesn't really make WWE. I don't think we're really comparing apples to apples when you get into it. I think they merged. They're going to be smart about it. But in my opinion, there's no way production's going to go in reverse. Nothing goes in reverse. I do think there's a chance that, maybe there's a way to utilize the UFC legends in a different role. And maybe those legends may be some crossover in one-offs or something like that. I just think, their business models are different. The fight game is different than the professional wrestling game. I know I sound repetitive, but no, Conrad, I don't think they're going backwards in production.
Can you imagine a George St. Pierre tag match in Montreal?
That's bingo.
I mean, George St. Pierre with Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn in a 6-man tag against, the Bloodline or some such shit, Judgment Day or whatever. That'd be unbelievable.
You could fantasy book so many different things. I mean, back in the territory days when you brought in a guest special referee, and they've done it with, we did it in Dallas with Leon Spinks, but they did it with Joe Frazier. They've done it, over and over and over. Professional athletes used to step in, in their off season and be the special referee or the special enforcer. I think there's going to be so many opportunities how to integrate them in. It's going to be interesting on the tipping point, whatever that may be, because Logan Paul, above and beyond. I mean, a Bad Bunny, you know, on a much small, you know, the guys that step into the world, somebody's going to lay an egg, and I think that'll put the. I think it will give some celebrities, former athletes, a little trepidation, like, oh boy, that didn't turn out well for that celebrity or that ex-athlete. I'm not sure I want to dive into it, but right now it's the shiny object all over the all over the globe.